Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining tonight. It looks like we're just going to have people rolling in as we go. So feel free to keep introducing yourself in the chat. My name's Bené Hershon. I'm the Community Engagement Director of the Cheshire County Conservation District. And I'll just hand it over to any district staff who would like to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Bené. This is Amanda Littleton, also with the Cheshire County Conservation District.
Okay, so I realized I jumped the gun here. So I'm bound
No
out.
worries, Lisa.
Silly me. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much, and feel free to, just keep sharing in the chat your name, what farm, where you're calling in from tonight. You can also feel free to share maybe what you might be interested in applying for, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So thank you all so much again for tuning in. Just as a recap tonight, we're going to be talking about the New Hampshire Conservation District's Climate Resilience Grant. And this is really an exciting opportunity to improve your farm's resilience through a climate adaptation or mitigation project. And I have already said this about 3 times, so I won't say it again, but feel free to just type in the chat an introduction. And it would also be really helpful to just hear how you heard about this grant and this info session tonight. Great, and thank you to everyone who's already introduced themselves so far. So just as a recap and an introduction, the mission of this grant opportunity is to really support and empower local farmers to build climate resilience throughout the Granite State. So this will be done through reducing the impact of agriculture on climate change, and that's what we refer to as mitigation, through greenhouse gas emissions reduction and carbon sequestration. And to increasing the resiliency of New Hampshire farms in a changing climate. And that's what we refer to as adaptation when we're talking about climate. And so the goal of this is to really support that mitigation and adaptation while also meeting your farm's conservation goals and needs. So just a little bit of background. This is actually the second grant round of the Climate Resilience Grant. Last summer was the first round that we offered, and it was a really brief pilot round. So I'm sure it didn't reach as many folks in the first round. We had limited funding that first round, but we also had some really great projects. So later on, as the evening goes on, I will pop in the chat just a link to a web page that really shows some great examples of the projects that we funded in the first round. And it might be helpful as you start to formulate what you might want to apply for in this round. And just a little bit of background on how we really designed this program. The New Hampshire Conservation Districts, we all came together last year and we started planning this out. And, we made sure that this program was designed with a high level of farmer input. So we interviewed farmers throughout the state. We interviewed our partners at the USDA and NRCS. We interviewed partners at UNH Extension, some of our other conservation partners, just to get a really good idea of what that need looks like, and to better understand what gaps there currently are in funding to meet these goals. And I'll just add that this program is going to really continue to grow over the course of the next few years. This is really the second round. So as you're filling out your application or you're brainstorming your project and you notice anything or you have any ideas, and while you're filling it out, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the district staff and offer us feedback on this process, because we're still learning and growing through this grant. So just some background on eligibility. So in order to apply for the grant, you have to be a farm in New Hampshire. Eligible farms must be selling direct to consumer or through wholesale markets for at least 2 years. Eligible farms must have secure access, so that's either owning or a long-term lease on land, to land on which the operator is farming. So if you're leasing, it's important that the lease is in writing, and that it has to have a term long enough for the farmer to complete the proposed improvement project and see a return on the investment. And so we really just want to make sure that these funds are used in a sustainable way. So for example, if you have a lease that's ending in 2 years, what's going to happen to the project after? We really want to make sure that these projects have a sustainable and long-term impact. And to receive funding, a farm must also operate in compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. Eligible projects. The New Hampshire County Conservation Districts were requesting proposals from farms who seek funding to make investments in the following areas, and I'll dive into those in the next slides. But as I said, we're still really shaping this grant program, so we really welcome proposals for projects that aren't represented on the list. But if you feel that they align with the mission and goals of the program of adapting to and mitigating climate change, then you're more than welcome to submit an application, as long as the reasoning is really there and aligned with the goals. So these are just a few of the examples of eligible projects. So the first category is really practices which promote minimizing soil erosion and maximizing carbon capture. So examples of those practices would be cover cropping, transitioning to reduced or no tillage, mulching, windbreaks, buffers, funding for equipment and materials to promote healthy soil practices. So that could be silage tarps, a roller crimper, or other low or no-till implements and equipment. Some other practices could be transitioning to rotational grazing and grass-based systems. So for example, if you're looking for fencing in order to implement that, crop rotation, fixing gullies on fields to stop further soil loss, soil nutrient management, soil testing, soil carbon monitoring and testing systems, as well as soil sensors. We're also going to be funding practices which promote sustainable water management. So that includes waste and manure storage and management. And we funded quite a few of those projects last year. And I'll pop the link in the chat so that you can see some examples of that. Runoff capture and reuse, riparian pollinator buffers and plantings, efficient irrigation systems, efficient well systems, and water sensors. And I think it's really exciting that the well and irrigation aspect, we've gotten a lot of questions about that. So that's just another one of the many projects that you could apply for through this grant. And now this year is a really exciting addition. We didn't have funding for it in the last grant round, but we have a portion of funds available this year for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, which I'm very excited about. But it's also just important to note, we want to be transparent that we do have limited funding available for this. So just please keep that in mind. But those projects can include solar pumps, panels, LED lighting, energy efficient technology, efficient cooling systems, for example, CoolBot technology, when folks transition their AC units into a cooler setup, climate batteries, as well as insulation. And some other eligible projects that we have would be integrated pest management practices. So that could be fruit and vegetable netting, as well as weather stations and sensors. And I'm just going to hand it over to Amanda for the rest of the slides. Thanks, Amanda.
All right, thank you, Benet. So where will priority be given to for projects? Well, first of all, we want to make sure that it's focused on climate change mitigation or adaptation. That's really key when you're thinking about selecting the type of project. The projects that have the closest tie-in to mitigation and or adaptation are what's going to be ranked the highest for funding. Following application guidelines, I know that seems sort of without saying, but just going through and answering fully all the questions that are on there is very helpful for the reviewers. Having a detailed plan for project implementation, education, long-term maintenance, and sustainability will also really help your project get funded. Having a strong track record of success in projects that are scientifically supported by partner agencies. So that's basically, this this grant round really isn't about experimental design or anything like that. It's really like, all right, these are proven technologies. You've seen this successful on other farms in New Hampshire or throughout different regions. And so you want to be able to adapt that for your own property. Provides opportunities to partner with your local conservation district to offer community education and share your project story through conservation district publications and other partners and social media. You might be wondering, why is this part of a climate grant? Well, it's really important for us to be able to show that peer-to-peer education. We want other farmers to be able to learn from what the successful projects are. And then providing opportunities to partner with the local conservation district and other partner organizations you might be working with to monitor your project, sort of assess how well it's working after the implementation. That way it informs, the results really will inform future programming and research in the community. So what will the grant funding fund? Practice implementation costs, materials, any services you need, like engineering, land planning, architectural services, all direct expenses with it. If you're purchasing equipment with the grant funds, say you were transitioning to no-till, for example, that's an eligible funding source, or not funding source, funding use, I should say. And any technical assistance that you need or consulting and legal services that might be necessary for implementation. As long as all of the things you're asking for are directly tied with how is this going to help you meet your farm's goals? How is it going to help you adapt or mitigate the changing climate? All right. So what, on the flip side of that, it's what won't be funded. So things that we cannot fund through this is like research and feasibility studies. Like I said earlier, this is not meant to be experimental or research. It's meant to take proven technology, proven practices, and implement them on your farm. Also not looking to do any advertising or marketing with this. It's really about sort of on the farm implementation. And projects that have already been installed. I just want to call this one out because a lot of times people are like, oh, I just did, a solar installation 2 years ago and I'm still paying for it. Can I get funding for that? And while we commend you for doing that, that's awesome. Being early adopters in these situations, we can't do funding retroactively. So it has to be for new projects that you're just implementing now this year. All right. So the way the funding works is that the grant's going to cover up to 75% of project costs, and we can fund up to $10,000 per farm. So what that means is farmers are responsible for covering 25% of project costs. Now, what the match could be, what you're covering, what farmers are covering for that 25%. It could also include your time and any materials that you're bringing to the project. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a cash outlay. You could be also considering about what you're bringing to the project as your match. Because time is money and it's really worthwhile and valuable. Also just want to note that there are two different funding pools for this. One is for more of the ecological practices, things around soil health, water quality, water quantities, integrated pest management, and then the other pool is around the energy projects. So we have about half of the funds for each types of projects. So it is limited in their scope. All right. So here's the timeline. Proposals are due February 1st, which is coming right up in a few weeks. In the meantime, before February 1st, we really encourage anyone who's interested in this to reach out to your county conservation district to talk through your project ideas, get feedback, and see how this program can work for the goals that you have for your farm. So between February and March, there's proposal review at the local conservation district level. At that time, you might be contacted for additional information if there's questions from the review committee. And then all applicants are going to be notified of the funding decision, either whether you're successful or not with the application by the close of March. What that means is that way, once you get that, say you're a successful applicant, once you get that running, you're going to get a contract to complete, and then you can start your project. And you're going to have the rest of 2023 to complete your project and the entire year of 2024. And we ask that you, when you're planning your project, you consider your implementation timeline. Like, am I able to get this done in 2 field seasons at the very most? All right. And then at the end, I'll just say, just sort of as a little tie-in to that last one, when the projects are due at the end of 2024, we'll have a final report. And part of that will be like, we'll ask you to keep all your receipts that you're using to spend on this project throughout, to be able to reimburse you for those. We want to be able to have record of that. And then there'll be a final report to complete as well that just kind of tells us how the project went for you. So awardee documentation. So if you're successful, I mentioned this earlier, we are going to ask you to sign a contract that basically just says, like, this is your role as the farmer, this is our role as the conservation district. We're agreeing to move forward with the project for this much money. Really straightforward, simple contract. We'll also need proof of liability insurance for your farm. That's just a certificate of insurance that we can have on file, that just helps cover in case there's anything that goes wrong. All right. So how do you create a strong proposal? Research your budget. This is key, especially these days when prices are skyrocketing all the time. It's really important when you create your budget to sort of have more accurate numbers and to make sure that you've checked in recently on them. So it doesn't hurt to get some quotes from contractors you might be interested in working with, as well as for material costs, to be able to plan this out realistically. And if some of your research might include not just talking to contractors or suppliers of materials, but it might also be talking to, folks at UNH Extension, folks at USDA and RCS, some sort of other planners that you might be working with to help inform your project, to make sure that it's really strong proposal. Next piece is include as much detail as you can. It can't hurt, because a lot of times the folks who are reviewing these applications may not have a strong understanding of exactly what you're trying to do. So the more detail that you can supply, it shows that you really understand the project, and it helps us understand what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's really always helpful. If you've got examples, go ahead and send them along as attachments as well. Answer all the application questions. Again, that's key. It really helps to make sure we understand the full scope of your project, and contact your conservation district with any clarifying questions. That's what we're here for as conservation district staff. We're really excited to talk to you about project ideas you might have, brainstorm with you, point you in the direction of resources if you have any questions. So technical assistance advisors. So we really think it would be useful for farms who are applying for these grants to think about who are your resources, like who's part of your team. And that's all we're really considering as technical assistance advisors. Like perhaps you already have a great relationship with someone at UNH Cooperative Extension or USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, or the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts, one of their conservation planners. This is sort of, or maybe it's a crop advisor that you work with on a regular basis. This could be anybody that's sort of part of your network on your team that can help you build a strong proposal and make sure that you have assistance as you go forward with implementation as well. All right, so here's sort of a list with some links, and we'll make sure everybody has these slides. That way you can, if you aren't familiar with some of these technical service providers, it would be great for you to get in touch with them and talk to them and check out their websites and see what they have to offer. So as we said earlier, NRCS, Extension, NHACD, private sector crop advisors. There's also the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And if you're looking into energy projects, the Lakes Region Community College, New Hampshire Rural Renewables is a great resource. And every region is going to have specific resources as well. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations and municipal folks as well through planning commissions that might be able to help you out. So definitely, we're just trying to encourage people to use your network. And I think with that, that ends our formal part of our presentation. But both Benet and I are here to answer any questions you have. And there's also other conservation district staff on. I know Lisa's here from Belknap County and Pam is here from Grafton County. And there may be some others who signed on afterwards. So we really just sort of want to provide this opportunity for question and answer and brainstorming if you have project ideas and any questions about it. So with that, I just encourage people to write some questions. Feel free to write them in the chat. If you want more details about anything, or if you have specific questions, please add that right into the chat now, or feel free to just unmute and raise your hand or just jump in. All right, so starting to see some come in. So one is, if we have a plan in place with NRCS or a quote from a contractor, should we submit it with our application? Absolutely. That would be wonderful supporting documentation to show that you have a broader plan in place. And then if you've gotten quotes, it's sort of a great attachment to show that you've researched your budget thoroughly. So we would always love to see that. More information is better than less in these situations. It looks like there's a question from Susan Wyatt about what about no-till planting? Yes, if you're looking to transition from tillage to reduced till or no-till, that is certainly something that we see as soil health benefits and is a mitigation and adaptation on your farm. And so we are really encouraging folks to consider what their options are for transitioning into reduced tillage. And so some items, depending on your scale of your farm, that will look differently. Some items might be silage tarps, as Benet mentioned, as a potential eligible item. That's great for small scale producers. Perhaps you're a corn grower. You might want to retrofit your corn planter to make it no-till. And there's so many other different pieces of equipment in between. And there's different ways that you can sort of go about taking those steps to improve your soil health. So that's definitely a great use of these funds. All right, what's coming up next? Would irrigation project for fruit trees be possible to help conserve water? So if you're, I think one of the things with the water, I mean, for conservation of water, we're looking at sort of going in more efficiency. So if you have an irrigation system now and you are looking to make that more efficient through a different type of system, that seems like a really great fit for this type of project. How many funds do you have to spend statewide and how much per county? That's a question from Richard. So thanks for that question. I'm glad that you brought that up. So for this grant round, we have $300,000 in grants statewide to make available. So that breaks down based on the 10 New Hampshire counties to be about $30,000 per county, with the cap per farm being $10,000. So, you know, at the very most, each county could give 3 grants of $10,000 each. But I really would want to wouldn't want you to feel discouraged if your project has a smaller budget than that. We really do welcome grants that range in prices. It's just because the cap is $10,000. If your project is $700 because you really need some help with additional cover crop seeding or transitioning to a different type of, reduced tillage, don't stop from applying because it's not a big ticket item. We really do welcome all ranges of grants. And there was another question, it looks like from Jay, to please post the web links from the slides. Absolutely, we're going to do that. And we'll send you guys, everybody who's registered for this, an email with those links as well. I'm trying my best to answer some of these questions. Benay, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything or if there's anything that you want to add to this as well. And I just would also encourage the participants who did ask a question in the chat, if you have follow-up to the answer that was just provided, don't hesitate to write another follow-up question, or feel free to just raise your hand or unmute and ask it out loud. All right, so let's see, a couple more coming in. Would turning a pasture into an orchard qualify? Well, that really depends. So, I mean, I think that I just want to go back to the mission of this grant fund, which is all about climate adaptation and mitigation and helping your farm be more viable in the face of these extreme weather events and droughts and additional pest pressures, because we really want it to be about sort of helping your farm be successful in the long run. And so if you can tie in sort of why your farm viability goals are connected to transitioning pasture into an orchard, and how that is going to help you meet your climate adaptation or mitigation goals, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on that. But I think it's those sort of, when you're considering a project, just coming back to that cornerstone of like, is this the fit of the mission of this grant? And if not, maybe, or if you're not sure, maybe that's a good opportunity to have a phone call or exchange some emails with the conservation district staff.
Yeah, and I think your answer, Amanda, really ties into the next question as well. For purchasing equipment to help make compost on the farm, I think it really depends on the reasoning. So if the reasoning is soil health as a form of adaptation or mitigation, I think it could definitely qualify. It would just depend on the reasoning behind the grant application. Oh, perfect. And Richard, I'll put that right in the chat.
So application links is what was just being asked for in the chat, in case everyone's not following the chat questions along. And so just want to encourage people, before you jump in to the application, download the request for proposals, or the RFP. This is what spells out what we're looking for. And so if you have any questions, take a good read through that request for proposals, and that way you can understand sort of what we're looking for. It really is pretty much what we've been talking about throughout this presentation, but I just want to make sure people don't skip that step of looking at the RFP, because it really does inform how you're going to write the application. And speaking of the application, just want to note that we're not looking for a voluminous amount of writing, like not a novel at all here. I don't want anyone to be intimidated by the fact that you have to write up this application. It really is that we're just trying to get straight to the point of sort of what your needs are that you're seeing on the farm, how this project is going to meet your needs, and then how you're going to sort of go about completing it successfully, maintaining it for long-term sustainability, and offering other education and outreach opportunities to other farms in the region, how you can help them learn from what you've been implementing on your farm.
And I'll just add, if you're looking for the contact information for your district, I'm just going to pop a directory link in the chat so that you can get in touch with your district staff.
Right, thanks, Benay, that's awesome.
Amanda, this is Lisa. I'd like you, Tyson Morrill had asked a question. I don't know if you caught that, about tax implications.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you pointing that out. So any tax implications for the funding award? That is something that, so what this is really funding for reimbursement of services and materials. So it's not additional income for your farm necessarily, though we did have this question today. So our last accountant, we've talked to them and they said it's not considered additional income and you do not need a 1099 to submit to folks who receive these awards. But we are going to clarify that with one additional accountant just to make sure that that is the case. And so I want to let folks know that we can do a follow-up email on that. Once we have clarification, we'll have a call into them tomorrow morning to ensure whether or not we need to be submitting 1099s to any of the applicants for consideration for income. I hope that helps. Sorry, it's a little wishy-washy at the moment, but according to our last accountant, no 1099 necessary. We want to confirm so there's no surprises for any of the farmers participating. Were there any other questions that were in the chat that we may have overlooked, or anybody who just wants to unmute and share a question with the group is 100% welcome right now.
Yeah, or even share, you know, what you might be interested in applying for. We could always help brainstorm right now.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Tewksbury. I currently have, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I have a small fruit farm and it is on a piece of land that does not have any electricity. We were currently thinking about putting in a well. Does anybody have a well system currently that they run without electricity on the farm? Is it generator run, or is there other efficient energy solar pumps that they're using that I could reach out to? Just
Nicole.
for
I was gonna say, Nicole, thank you for that question. That's great. And it's nice to be able to use the other farmers here to try to garner some of that information. So I want to open that up to other farmers. What do you guys think? Any insight for Nicole?
I don't know if this will be helpful because it really depends on how your land is. But my farm is off grid and my well and irrigation is all gravity fed. So if you don't have any sort of hill structure, that doesn't work for you. But we are looking into solar pumps, but I can't help you answer that question.
okay.
Nicole, are you working with anybody from NRCS at this point for looking at sort of those considerations?
No.
So
Not
that
yet.
might be a good start, is to reach out to your local county conservation district and NRCS office to see about a site visit. They might have some good, even if they aren't able to fund wells right now, which I know NRCS is not doing for production, but they still can provide you with technical assistance and advice, as well as your UNH, cooperative extension, ag educator, or the NHACD conservation planners. All these folks are usually really willing to come out and do a site visit with you and sort of troubleshoot and look through sort of what the options might be.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question based on something you just said to Nicole, that you said that you're not funding wells right now, but are you funding solar panel systems that could be used to pump the well instead of using a generator, or instead of using a generator, I guess?
Yeah, Luann, thanks for the question. And I apologize if that was confusing. What I was referring to is that USDA NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, through their environmental quality and the EQIP program, they are not funding wells right now. So I wasn't referring to this program specifically. So I apologize for the confusion there. But yes, if you have a project that you're looking for additional funding for, that this could help with, and you're investing in a well, you're utilizing solar pumps, it's certainly a possibility to use these grant funds, because the water that perhaps is necessary for your production is going to be coming from that. And that's going to be helping alleviate the challenges that droughts are presenting to your farm. So yes, that looking at water management in that way through this program is 100% an acceptable use. And we would encourage you to look into applying and talking to your conservation district about it.
All right, thank you so much.
I have a question on the maple industry. As far as vacuum pumps, I had a site visit a week or two ago with NRCS. And NRCS does not fund vacuum pumps. They'll do ROs and steam aways and such. But as far as a vacuum pump and climate change, that's something that really helps us gain SAP as we lose these freezing nights with climate change and such. And I was curious if that's something that would be considered.
Thank you for that question, Will. We haven't had any questions about maple yet. So yes, anything that's going to help you adapt to this changing climate and keep your production levels would definitely be considered.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, looks like there's, oh, sorry, Nicole, were you about to ask the question?
Sorry, no, I forgot to
Okay.
mute myself again.
No worries. All right, looks like there's an additional question from Sarah in the chat. So would reclaiming more old pasture and perimeter fencing for a grazing dairy and beef farm that practices rotational grazing be a good fit? Since past years with drought have shown us that we need more pasture with longer rest periods to provide feed for the herds. Yes, absolutely. That would be a good fit. It's something that's allowing you to continue to keep up your levels of production while also ensuring strong soil health because of the rotational grazing and the rest periods that are necessary for that ground. So that's certainly a good fit. Really, soil health practices are such an important part of why we even started this grant. So anything that's improving soil health practices has a really strong connection to adaptation and mitigation on the farm. Whether it's droughts or extreme weather events, improving soil health is not going to waste anybody's time with this. So we're really excited to see applications that focus on that.
And it looks like there was a follow-up question from Jim in the chat. So Amanda, you can feel free to elaborate, but I think what Amanda was getting at was just that any project, we just need to have that explanation. So I think, you know, instead of just converting a field to orchard, to have that tie-in, to really stressing the element of the mitigation as part of that project, if that makes sense.
Other questions or ideas that you guys want to brainstorm about?
Hi, it's
Hi,
Jerry Ann
Jerianne.
from Lucky 13. We are interested in applying for a plastic mulch layer for our farm for a multitude of reasons. Really, our soil moisture loss has been an issue this season, and then using the plastic mulch will allow us to use the tiller less, cultivators less, and will save us time with cultivating by hand and with the tractor. So that's what we're applying for.
Thanks, Jerianne. Appreciate
Thanks.
you. Do you have any questions about it, or are you just looking to sort of get some feedback and brainstorm?
I just thought I'd throw out what we're looking to do. Yeah, I don't necessarily have any questions because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So
Yeah, and what I'll say is Sullivan County funded a project. I think it may have not been for the plastic mulch itself, but they did get a plastic mulch layer, the farm in Sullivan that had applied for it. I'm not sure if they were using, there is biodegradable plastic mulching you can get. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the specifics were of what they applied for. But I think that's definitely a mitigation and adaptation practice that, you know, probably more so adaptation, but I think it's definitely something you could apply for.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks. You too. Thanks.
Hi, this is Sarah at Open Woods Farm. I mentioned that my farm is off grid. Our house is off grid. We live about a mile from the nearest power, so it's not possible to be on grid. And that makes it hard to get federal funding for solar projects because the idea is that you will give back to the grid once you are funded for solar. Would I be eligible to apply for a specific solar project even though I'm not on grid?
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. Being off grid isn't, or on grid isn't a requirement for this. Just noting that I know a lot of solar installations are quite expensive. And so just keeping in mind, planning around the fact that this max grant award is only $10,000. Bené's actually created a great resource that has funding for farms, a listing of funding for farms, both grants and loans for energy efficiency and renewable energy work. And so I just want to point that out, that this could be a complement to some other resources as well that your farm may need to sort of start looking into. So we'll make sure that we share that resource with all the attendees.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and I just put it in the chat as well. And I would just encourage, we added a few more additional resources on the first link I sent. That's just the Cheshire County website, but I'll make sure that you all have access to those resources in the email that I'll send after the session. Any other questions or ideas to brainstorm?
Well, not hearing any right now. And if you do think of one, just feel free to pipe up. But if you don't, and you do want to follow up with us, Bené put that link in the chat that has all the contact information for all the conservation districts in New Hampshire. So we really do encourage you to look up who your contact is in your county, reach out to them, talk to them about your project, any thoughts you might have, any questions you might have, because this is a great opportunity to sort of explore. And even if your project idea is not the perfect fit for this grant, chances are the conservation district staff person you're going to talk to is going to have other resources they're going to be able to point you in the direction to, whether it's technical assistance, getting site visits lined up, or other grants and loan programs that might be of use to you. So we really do just encourage you to start that conversation if you don't already have a relationship with your local conservation district. Looks like there's one last question in the chat that I'm seeing about level of competition in the last grant round. So I will say that during the pilot grant round, the timing was really bad for farmers. It was over the summer that we did this. So I think it was a lot less competitive because of that timing. That's why this grant round is set up for the winter months. So it's a more farmer friendly timeline. So I think that it will be a competitive grant round no matter what. And it still was this summer. Not all projects that folks applied for were funded, but we do really encourage you to apply regardless of that level of competition, because we do have a decent amount of funding here. And like I said, we hopefully, once we see what your goals are, we might be able to help you find additional funding, even if it's not from this program. All right, well, not seeing any additional questions or hearing anything else, I'll just, I think Benet and I, maybe we can hang out for a few more minutes and see if anybody else wants to chat. Otherwise, anything else you want to say for parting words, Benet?
I'll just say, thank you all so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And I'll send a follow-up email just with all the links that were put in the chat, and you'll have our contact information and the contact information for your district staff. But please don't hesitate to reach out. We're really excited about this grant round, and if you come across any ways or suggestions for improvement, more than welcome. So thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.